Good afternoon, and once again, welcome to the weekly Rotoworld Fantasy Basketball Q&A. I'm Raphielle Johnson, joined as always by Noah Rubin. Noah, 12-game night last night. You sufficiently recovered from the busy night in the NBA.
I don't want to say sufficiently, but I think recovered is by this point in the day. I think that's a pretty good word for it. But it was a lot of exciting games, so it wasn't too many. At least maybe the games I wrote about that were like dragging on, not exciting games. It was a good night of basketball. Maybe I just lucked out with the games I got to write about.
Yeah, you got some pretty good ones. I had the glory of writing about the Washington Wizards, and man.
Fine. I'm sure that because didn't Clay get off to like a really good start at 21 points,
Yeah,
7 threes in the first quarter, and then nothing else.
Yeah, he was on a minutes limit. For those who don't know, he's still limited to 24 minutes, and just worked out perfectly that they were able to just blow out Washington, so it didn't matter. Like in other instances, like Kawhi Leonard, for example, we see the minutes limit, and they're not on the floor in crunch time. Obviously, wasn't going to be the case for Clay last night, so that's kind of what you're hoping for if you have guys like that rostered.
Definitely, it would have been fun to see him break a record though, because if he, I mean, 7 threes in the first quarter, absolutely on pace.
He was on pace for 28 threes.
Yeah, I mean, what if?
All right. We got some questions already lined up in the queue, so let's just dive right into those right now. And Ryan is back as usual. Thanks for tuning in again, Ryan. ESPN 12 Cap Points League. He was offered Zach LaVine and Goga Bitadze for Zubats, Nick Richards, and Toumani Camara. That is a win if he takes LaVine and Goga, correct?
I'm not confident in that. I think my thought process looking at it is that LaVine has like a really good chance of being traded at the deadline, and I'm not saying he's gonna be bad wherever he goes, but his role might be a little different, maybe a few less shots per game. And Goga, I assume, is gonna go back to the starting lineup, but I guess that's not technically a guarantee. He came off the bench his first game back. Zubats has been playing incredibly well. Nick Richards has been pretty good for the most part. A couple bad games as a starter for the Suns, and Comer, I think his role is only going to increase. So I don't know. I might actually prefer the second package, or like the what you have right now.
Yeah, I would say so. I think maybe what can enter the thinking a little bit is that LaVine's going to be out for that road trip here because the birth of his child. So that's 3 games missed. And then you have the trade deadline the following week. So maybe you're limited there. But I think I would prefer to hold on to Zubats, Richards, and Camara because we've seen Zubats, even with Kawhi Leonard back, obviously still restricted, but he's been able to provide value anyway. Nick Richards kind of up and down. Camara, like Noah said, his role should only expand. Like he's played well recently, and there's no reason for them to not try more things with him after the trade deadline in Portland. So I think I'd prefer to hold on to those guys. If I were to move any of those 3, it'd probably be Richards. But you wouldn't. I don't think you'd be able to do a 1-for-1 for Goga in that situation. So. All right. MTS is back. 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. What would you be looking to do with Colin Sexton at this point? He also has Keontae George.
Oof.
That's tough. Go ahead now.
Oh yeah, it's interesting because Colin Sexton obviously last season I think played pretty much every game until April. I think he sat out the last 4 games. It's been different this year already. I mean, hasn't missed a lot as much as some of the other guys, but he has missed some time. It depends on if Utah is going to do what Utah probably should do at this point, and that's trade away some of these guys that can be productive on playoff teams. Keontae, I feel a little like, I mean, he's coming off the bench now. Like Isaiah Collier is the starting point guard for the team, and doesn't really seem he's going to give that up. So Keontae, you could probably, if you really want the points, because he's going to continue to shoot it a lot, then maybe he's a guy to hang on to. I don't think he's a must roster player. I guess you could try and trade Colin Sexton at this point, but I don't think he is a guy that's going to be shut down because they didn't do it last year.
Yeah.
And if they trade him, I think that he will play a significant role. So I don't know. I might just sit tight on Sexton right now.
I think I try to move him.
Okay.
As I look at last year's roster, as you mentioned, with him playing pretty much all the way through, they didn't have an Isaiah Collier on that roster. So I think that may factor into his minutes moving forward if they hold on to him after the trade deadline. So I think I would lean towards looking to trade him. Keontae, I think you're kind of stuck here. The role is such that you probably won't be able to drop him outright, but I'm not sure what type of value you'll be able to get for him in a trade either. So yeah, I don't know. I think Sexton's probably going to fish back, fetch better trade value back in return. So you may want to try to move him, but Keontae, yeah, you're probably going to be stuck with him for the rest of the season, if anything.
Yeah.
All right. Also, would you try to move Donovan Mitchell anticipating rest down the stretch? Fantasy playoffs are weeks 20 through 22 in this league.
Maybe. I mean, Donovan Mitchell's been kind of interesting because obviously he's an all-star starter, Cleveland's best record in the East, but he hasn't. I get why he's an all-star starter because the team is what they are, and like he's the best player, or viewed as the best player. Who's a little older than Evan Mobley and Darius Garland, so he's kind of got that reputation. So I get why he's an all-star starter, but he hasn't been nearly as good as he was last season. I wouldn't hate trading him anyways, just like as it is for somebody that maybe is closer to like a top 20, top 15 player, because I think he still has enough of a reputation that you might be able to make something like that happen. And yeah, I think that it would make sense for Cleveland to give him a couple off nights here and there just to make sure he's fresh for the playoffs. So I don't hate the idea of trying to trade him away, but I think you would, with the intention of trying to get more games played, if you're anticipating some rest, you have to get somebody that's kind of in the middle of the pack fighting for playoff positioning as opposed to just another really good player on a really good team.
All right. Different positions, but what would you think of Donovan Mitchell for Franz Wagner? Or is that not enough to give up for Mitchell?
That's, I don't know. I think I'd still keep Mitchell in that sense. I think Franz obviously been incredible overall, but now that he's playing with Paolo Banchero, I'm not optimistic that, I mean, I think his 9 cap value overall, it's 14th on Basketball Monster right now. That's going to continue to kind of slide down. So I think I'd rather just hold on to Mitchell in that scenario.
Cade Cunningham?
I'd rather have Cade for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So I mean, Detroit's going to be fighting for, I mean, I think right now in the standings, maybe not. I think they lost. Maybe they're out in the play-in picture right now, but yeah, they're 8th right now, but they're a half game behind the Heat at 6. So
yeah. Okay. So yeah, I agree with Noah. I think you kind of want to aim high here in terms of a trade piece in return, just because he still has that name recognition. An All-Star game starter, you can sell that to a prospective owner, and you should probably be able to get some pretty good value back in return for him. And then another kind of a podcast favorite, I guess you'd call him, Yves Missi. Is it time to bail on him, given he doesn't provide spacing next to Zion, and minutes seem to be cratering unless Zion is resting? Whew.
It's a tough one because I think there was a report, an ESPN report earlier, that the Pelicans are going to be looking to make a big move at the deadline. I don't know what that looks like, but they're 12-35. I think last week we talked about they've won like 4 games in a row. They're the hottest team in the league. Okay, they've lost 3 in a row since then. I kind of saw that coming, but it was like, what if? But I'd be pretty shocked if Zion plays every single game for the rest of the season for the Pelicans. I'm like, or like outside of the scheduled rests on back-to-backs and things like that. Like he'll still miss a good bit of time. But like I wouldn't blame anybody for kind of dropping Missi at this point. Like in their last game, 22 minutes played. Like sure, he still got a steal, 3 blocks, 5 rebounds. He didn't get a shot attempt. Like, that's like DeJounte Murray was out there. So like it wasn't like, they didn't have a point guard. Like he was out there. No shot attempts, no free throws. I mean, pretty much at this point, not that Emisi is going to be a guy they're forcing shots for, but a lot of his shots are going to come off of offensive rebounds or being fed layups and dunks.
Yeah.
And that just didn't happen in their last game. So, I mean, the blocks are nice, but they haven't been consistent this year. I wouldn't be mad about dropping Misi at this point, though I do think he'll be pretty good down the stretch.
Yeah, I think this is a situation where it depends on the rest of your roster. Now, if you have a powerful roster, you may be able to stash him essentially, for the stretch run, because I don't care what they say down there, they're not getting back in the mix for a playing spot. Like, let's be honest here. No, come on. They got hot last week and went to Charlotte and got beat by about 30. So it's not happening. Let's just. I hate to be blunt about it, but we just have to be honest sometimes. Who knows what's going on with Brandon Ingram? There's a question about him later in the Q&A that we'll get to, but Zion's probably going to have at least another extended absence. Not just medical history, but again, they're 12 and 35. DeJounte Murray's been banged up. Trey Murphy's had his issues. So many issues on that roster with injuries this season. There's going to come a point where Yves Misi's going to have some value beyond what he's shown recently. So if you can afford to stash him, I would. But I certainly would understand if you're fighting for your playoff lives in your fantasy league, probably going to want to move him if there's someone on the waiver wire who can give you more value right away. Jermaine, thanks for tuning in. 12-team 9-cat head-to-head. I was offered LeBron and Jalen Green for Luka Doncic. Would this be a good deal?
I mean, my thought is it depends on the context of your team. If your team is playing really well and you are one of the top teams and you feel pretty comfortable on making the playoffs, then 100% I would do that trade. But on the flip side, if you're fighting for a playoff spot, we don't really know exactly when Luka is going to be back. So I'd rather have the two guys that are playing right now. You said they're saying when?
They're saying before the All-Star break. They're hoping.
Okay. So I mean, so that would be pretty good. Like that would be another at least about 2 weeks of him being out. It's like, can you afford that? Because I'd rather have Luka straight up, but if he's missing 2 more weeks, potentially more, makes me feel a little bit more iffy, and it would depend on how my team is.
Yeah, I think to look at that before the All-Star break, Dallas has 5 games total. Yahoo League sets that combo week that you get for the All-Star game. So they've got 5. You get them before then, you may be able to get 4 because they've got a back-to-back right before the All-Star break. So if he's back when they believe he possibly could be, you're probably looking at a injury management day for one of those 2 games before the break. But man, that's a good question. I think the whole key to this is Jalen Green, in my opinion. When he's efficient, shoots a good percentage, the ceiling is incredibly high for him in terms of fantasy value and real life basketball value too. But it's been so unpredictable that it's a risky move to say the least. So I can see both sides. I would prefer to have Luka Doncic in this scenario just because of what he brings to the table when he's healthy. Right. Brian, thanks for tuning back in. 10-team 9-cat head-to-head. Should I pick up Ayo Dosunmu and drop Nick Smith Jr.?
Yeah, that's a move I'd make. I like Nick Smith Jr. He's had a couple good games. The last 2 haven't been as good. If LaMelo ends up missing time, then that should help his value as well. But I would assume is like in my opinion, a must roster player for the rest of the season. Nick Smith's more of a streaming guy. Yeah,
Dosunmu back in the starting lineup on Monday. Interestingly enough, Patrick Williams played well off the bench, so maybe that's something they stick with moving forward. I would hope so. And like we mentioned earlier, Zach LaVine's not going to be on the road trip for personal reasons, so there's even more room for Ayo to kind of pick up where he left off before that calf injury. So, yeah, I like Nick Smith's situation in Charlotte, in terms of rest of season value, but I would still prefer Dosunmu here. Is Emmanuel quickly droppable in 12-team 9-cat head-to-head? FYI, I already have Chet in my IL and I'm sitting in first place.
I don't know. If you're in first place, I might just hold if you can. Like, I don't even know what the latest injury update is on Quickly. I just know he's been out for pretty much the entire season, aside from a handful of games. But I don't if there's a need to drop him, but if you're in first place, I don't see a need to drop him, I guess is kind of my thought process.
Yeah, it looks like the timeline Toronto gave, he may be back pretty soon, but
Okay.
we've seen him suffer multiple injuries this season. And Toronto's in a situation where they're 14-32. While that's 12th in the East, they're 5 games behind Philadelphia and Chicago in the loss column. And given where they are, I kind of feel like they're going to end up prioritizing the draft lottery over trying to get back into the mix. Look, man, no, come on. I know that. I know that look. I know that look, man. But
What if they get hot?
Yeah, that's
hottest team in the league right now. 4-game win streak. Them and the Lakers.
Yeah, I'm not betting on that happening. So
nah.
But yeah, my word. So that's I think I would probably drop him. But if you're in first place, you may have some margin for error here, but maybe you can turn that into a streaming spot for the time being based on who's on your waiver wire. Because I don't really trust Quickly to stay healthy at this point, even when he returns back.
It's fair.
All right. Speaking of the Raptors, who's the better pickup, Bruce Brown or Josh Okogie? I think I lean Bruce Brown here because it feels like Toronto's kind of showcasing him. His contract expires end of the season. Maybe that's a reason to hold on to him to keep that cap space. But on the flip side, I think he's someone who can fetch decent value in return via trade from teams that are looking to contend, for a championship this year. So,
yeah, I think both are pretty solid. I think Okogie's had a couple of good games recently, which I get the optimism about that, but he hasn't. I guess he should continue to see minutes for them, but aside from steals, nothing has really been consistent about him throughout his career. So yeah. I do feel better about Bruce Brown overall, though I do think both players are probably streamable at this point.
Clark Kent asks, any update on Jalen Johnson, Emmanuel Quickly, and Brandon Ingram? Just spoke on Quickly. Ingram, their news has been pretty sparse down there in New Orleans on him in terms of when he'll be back. Could be back soon, could be out longer. We don't really know there. Jalen Johnson's kind of a game-to-game situation. The concern is that he's already dealing with a right shoulder injury, then he injured the left one. And, yeah, I think they're still evaluating him as it is. So.
Yeah, I think the report was that they were going to try and do more tests before they gave a timeline, which that's not a great sign to me. It could be that they received one opinion that it's going to be like season ending or something, and they're like, we'll see. We'll see if somebody else disagrees or something like that. So we'll see. I'm kind of bracing for the worst there.
Yeah. Kool-Aid tripping. Thanks for tuning in. If you have to drop one out of these players in a 9-cat, Toumani Camara, DeAndre Hunter, or Alsar Thompson? I think I'm dropping Alsar of those 3.
Yeah, I think. You go ahead.
No, I'm just thinking like it hasn't really him moving into the starting lineup with the Jaden Ivey injury hasn't really panned out the way that a lot of us hoped it would. Obviously, he missed large chunk of time, due to the blood clot situation, so that kind of set him back. But you kind of look at him, you think of what Amen's doing down in Houston. You're hoping for not exactly similar production, but you're hoping for something close to that. It just hasn't happened. And part of that may be that they have a point guard in Cade Cunningham who's going to run. A lot of the offense is going to run through him as opposed to Houston. Fred VanVleet may bring the ball up, but they'll also run the offense through other people. So there's a little more room for Amin to shine down there than Alshire has in Detroit. So I think I would drop him out of those three.
Yeah, I think this could also depend on what categories you need because Sar's been kind of inconsistent. Like some games has been very like stuffs the stat sheet, get to a bunch of defensive stats, scores double digits, like shoots well. And then some games it's definitely like a miss where he just doesn't do much. Like for example, their last game, 0 points, had a steal, block, 6 boards, but went scoreless. Game before that had 16 points, 4 steals, a block. Like it's been very hit or miss. If you need points, then fine, you can keep DeAndre Hunter, but he really doesn't do much in the other categories. Like I think he had 35 last night. I'm trying to remember.
2 rebounds.
Had 2 rebounds. Maybe an assist, but it's like he's a good defender, but he doesn't get defensive stats.
Yeah.
If his shot's off, then he doesn't do anything. So I guess look at your team and what categories you need help with, because it's between Hunter and Asard. I wouldn't drop too money.
Yeah. All right. Thoughts on Collier, Klingon, and Jovic the rest of the season? I like all three.
Yeah.
That I think all three are in good positions here. Klingon, we'll see what happens after the trade deadline. If they move Robert Williams or DeAndre Ayton, either way, I think after the deadline, he's going to play a lot more, especially after the All-Star break too. Like that team's not going to do anything this season in terms of competition. So lottery pick, he's certainly going to play a lot. I think if you're looking for immediate value, I think the other two may be a little bit better. But Klingon gives you rebounds and blocks. Collier gets you assists and defensive stats. Jovic has been really good recently, especially offensively, rebounding too. So I like all three where they are right now, as well as where they are the rest of the season, given their individual circumstances.
Yeah, I agree. I think what these teams kind of do at the trade deadline is going to have a big impact on all of them. I feel like Collier's the safest. He's already starting. I don't expect anybody that's been out to come back and kind of bump him out of the starting lineup. It feels like his role is kind of safe for the rest of the year. Klingon starts when DeAndre Ayton isn't playing, and even if Ayton isn't moved, I feel pretty good about Robert Williams being traded at the deadline. But if Ayton isn't moved, he's still definitely a shutdown candidate. So I expect to see a lot of Donovan Klingon over the final 2 months of the year. Jovic is a little bit more interesting because the recent reports on Jimmy Butler is that the Heat have kind of lowered their asking price because they really want to move him, which makes sense. So Jovic should still have a large role and play plenty of minutes, but like, what does that look like if they trade Jimmy Butler to? There was a number of teams that I saw reported this morning now that they've kind of lowered their price, like the Warriors, the Sixers, the Timberwolves. Like, kind of funny that some of the teams that Jimmy already had previous stops at, but those, what does it take to get him over there? Who do they have to give up? Like if it's the Warriors, you could see a number of players coming over that are younger guys that could immediately be part of the rotation, part of Miami's future. So how does the rotation play out? So I think Jovic, I feel least safe about among these three, but I still feel pretty good about all of them.
Brian asks, will Chris Middleton sit out back-to-backs for the rest of the season, or should I take a chance?
I think he will, right? Like, I don't see him playing back-to-backs. Am I missing something? Did he play in a back-to-back recently, or?
I don't believe so. I think he's still.
Yeah. I'm like looking real quick.
I want to say he played in one when he first returned, but then they had to dial things back.
He did.
Yeah.
December 20th and 21st. Wow.
Then they eventually dialed things back in early January. Now he's coming off the bench. So he looked really good last night, but with all due respect, that's the Utah Jazz, and But I don't see a reason for Milwaukee to do that, because it'd be one thing if they were like in 6 or 7, struggling for playoff position. But they've kind of turned things around here. They're in 4th, and they're up 4 games on Miami in the loss column right now. So they're closer to teams like New York and Boston than they are Miami, Orlando, Detroit, those squads. So I think they can afford to maintain that conservative approach with Chris Middleton's playing availability.
Yeah, I'd be pretty surprised if he plays any back-to-backs. And you're right. He did play well in the last game, which was very good to see after he went scoreless the game before. And there was that clip of I forgot who it was guarding him. I think it was Derek Jones. So it wasn't like a bad defender or anything, but like Middleton just could not do anything on him. And that clip was definitely circulating. It was like, is this guy cooked? So good to see him have a kind of a bounce back game. Well, he's like, seriously, with the amount of injuries, with the amount of injuries that he has had, like you can't even blame him just like with how bad his knees are. So like it was good to see him play well. I guess it's been like we haven't seen it much over the last few years.
That's a good point. Okay. Clark Kent asked for some players to watch for the trade deadline in the second half silly season. I think we discussed this last week. It's kind of like scouring the rosters for teams that are like nowhere near playoff contention and looking for guys like that. I think we didn't mention him last week, but Day'Ron Sharpe in Brooklyn would be someone to consider because I don't know what happened to Nick Claxton, but man, has it been rough this season. And I can see him being a shutdown candidate, even if he's healthy later in the season, just because they want to improve their draft odds. They've kind of restocked their draft capital for the coming years. So I think Day'Ron Sharpe would be someone to keep an eye on in Brooklyn. Usual suspects like your Jalen Wilsons. Noah Clowney went out hurt last night, but when he's available, he's someone else in deep leagues that may have some value later in the season too.
Yeah, I actually recorded a show with Dan Vespris earlier. I think he said it's going to come out tonight, but we talked about trade deadline stashes. So I can throw out a few names that we talked about. Modest Buzelis in Chicago, because if they trade a bunch of guys, unless they think that they can make a run and get hot in the playoffs, which would be hilarious.
See,
it'd be funny. Like they
it would be so Bulls. Yeah,
it would be. Yeah, it'd be very, very, very Bulls to say, yeah, but we could make the play in again. But Buzelis, let's see a few. I mean, we've talked about a number of them, like Collier, Klingon,
Jalen Smith.
Yeah. I mean, because I expect Vooch gets traded. Kyle Filipowski in Utah, a couple of the Washington young guys, Portland Scoot Henderson as well. Hopefully they finally like unleash him. I potentially Yusuf Nurkic. They're going to trade him. Like, no, hear me out. They're going to trade him. He's not going to be on the team. Like, it would be very, very surprising with all the reports and the fact that he doesn't play and that he hasn't talked to Coach Bud in 2 months or whatever. Like, he's not going to be on the team. So he's either going to be on a playoff team that figures out a way to utilize him, or he's going to be on a tanking team that is like, hey, like, this guy doesn't play defense. This is why the Suns didn't play him. We need to lose games. Let's play this guy that doesn't play defense that looks like we're trying to win games. So he's going to have a role. I don't know if it'll be a 30-minute per game role, but he might have enough of a role to provide some value because I think can be like a pretty good fantasy player. Like he has been a pretty good fantasy player when he's getting enough minutes. So I think he still has that in him.
Yeah, he's still rostered in 67% of Yahoo leagues.
Yeah.
I guess gotta hold out hope, I guess. But
I mean that's I feel bad or like not bad, but like that's not the one name I wanted to harp on the most. Like let me just speak to Nurkic is not my mustache. I just ended up talking about him more.
Yeah, I'd throw another name in Utah, Bryce Sensabaugh. He'd be someone else who's likely going to have value.
Yeah,
for silly season too. So, all right. Are either of these guys worth a stash? Dante DiVincenzo, Jaden Ivey, or Jabari Smith Jr.?
I don't remember their timelines off the top of my head, but I don't think any of them are optimistic, right?
No. Yeah, because Smith may be the closest, but we're still looking at weeks for him. So, yeah, I don't think any of those guys would be worth stashing. And you can make an argument for Ivy, but who knows if he's even going to be back this season. I know he should be be evaluated pretty soon. So, yeah, I would not stash any of those guys personally.
I think I see DiVincenzo, the report from a few days ago is at least 3 weeks.
Yeah.
So maybe he's back fairly soon. And if he got dropped and you can afford a stash, then I do like that because Mike Conley has been playing well. Like DiVincenzo should move back in the starting lineup immediately.
Yeah, it's a good call there. All right. And we have a trade proposal here. 9-cat league from Josh Conwall. Cat and Nikola Jovic for Zubac, Jaylen Brown, and Mikal Bridges. So it looks like he's giving up 3 to get 2.
I don't hate that. I mean, Cat's by far the best player in that deal. Zubac is probably the best player on the other side because Jaylen Brown has been not playing to his standard so far this season. Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that. You open up a streaming spot as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point about the streaming spot. Jovic has been better, with the increased opportunities. Mikal has improved, but I think his ceiling's kind of capped in that lineup just because of how good the other 4 starters are. So, yeah, I think I would make that trade as well if you can get Cat. The one concern would be the thumb. 2 for 4 from 3 last night, but before that, he'd been struggling. It's one of those situations where I think for now you just kind of hope you can get to the All-Star break, and then we'll see what happens there. But, yeah, I think I would make this trade as well. All right. I think we talked about Jalen Johnson and quickly. Did we already get this question?
I think so. Maybe it was.
Yeah, we did. All right. Yeah, he asked it twice. All right. Grayson, thanks for tuning in. Trying to see if I'm overvaluing my players in Dynasty. Got offered Jalen Johnson, Kobe White, and Isaiah Hartenstein for my Jaren Jackson Jr., Franz Wagner, and Tyrese Halliburton. I thought it was crazy. I think you're right. That is crazy.
Yeah,
there's no way. Whoever offered you that, man.
It's kind of rude.
Yeah, they thought they'd pull one over on you, Grayson. You need to have some speaks with them about that because no.
Yeah, Jalen Johnson's like a really good dynasty asset. I mean, Halliburton's, even though he's kind of been down this year, I think he's still the best dynasty asset in this deal. And probably Jaren Jackson's number 2 but it might be Jalen Johnson too, but then it's definitely Jaren Jackson and Franz next. Kobe White and Isaiah Hartenstein are nowhere near the same tier as the other 4 players. So giving up 3, top 25 dynasty assets to get a top 25 and a couple top 100, top 75 guys, I don't think that's worth it. It's just ruined your day.
I just hope he didn't do it before he asked. But, all right, Thomas asked, would you trade Michael Porter Jr., Denny Avdia, and Nikola Jovic for Malik Monk and Jaylen Brown? 9-cat.
I think Malik Monk's probably the best player in this deal, right?
I would say so. Either him or Porter.
Yeah, because Jaylen Brown, like we just talked about, hasn't been quite as good this year as he has been in the past. That's a pretty even trade. I don't think I hate either side, but maybe just from the sense of you'd be opening up a potential streaming spot by taking the Monk and Jaylen Brown side. Both those guys' roles are going to be safe. So Brown hasn't been as good, but maybe he bounces back or figures things out second half of the season. I don't really see a ton more upside for MPJ. Jovic has been solid. Maybe Avdia has some upside if they either trade some guys or shut some guys down. But I think I might lean towards the Monk and Jaylen Brown side.
Yeah, I'm in a similar mind space here with that. I think Monk's in a spot where he's going to be valuable throughout the season just because of how well it's worked with him in the starting lineup. And they're going to be competing. Like Avdia, as well as he's played, I can envision a scenario where they give him the occasional night off after the All-Star break just because they kind of know what they have there with him. While Chris Murray, Ryan Rupert, those guys may need more minutes down the stretch. So I could see that happening with him. Porter, he's been good, but it's just his ceiling's just really low in Denver, I think. You got Jokic, you've got Jamal Murray, you've got Russell Westbrook, who's been playing really good basketball as well. So he's kind of in a tough spot in terms of that upside, in terms of fantasy. So, yeah, I think I would probably go with the 2-for-3 deal and have that streaming spot open. All right. Would you be looking to trade AD in 12-team 9-cat head-to-head? He's been balling and available, so stock is high. Just worried about durability as the season rolls on.
I think that there's 3 players in fantasy basketball I would trade AD for, and that's Jokic, SGA, and Wemby. I don't think that there's anybody else I'd rather have. Now, if you can get 2 guys that are just below him, like, for example, somebody offers you Maxey and Tatum, then yeah, I would do that. But that's not something that somebody would offer, one. And yeah, I think holding AD makes sense. Now, AD obviously does have a history of injuries. So like I understand the fear there, but he's been, like, knock on wood, relatively healthy the last 2 years. So hopefully it doesn't happen, because that would hurt me in one of my leagues as well. So I hope it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I think you just have to ride this out with Davis. You hope there isn't an extended absence at some point, but he's been so good this year that I don't think you can move him, at least not get good value in return. So yeah, I would hold on to Anthony Davis. And to that point, 12-team ESPN points league, Anthony Davis managers asked me for De'Aaron Fox and Miles Turner. I'm currently in first place. I'm not doing that personally.
You'd rather have Fox and Turner?
I'd rather have AD. Well, actually, no. Oh, okay. No, I read that wrong. I would not hesitate to accept that offer.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like I just said, like, there's only a couple scenarios in which I trade Anthony Davis. This is like I would absolutely rather have AD and another streaming spot than these 2 guys.
Yeah, go ahead and get that done, man.
Go in your league. You're in first place and you're about to get AD. Go in your league, man.
All right. I cut bait on Bub Carrington for now. Just didn't feel worth a roster spot lately. Is that a mistake? He's in 11th place. I don't think it's a mistake, just because of where you are in the standings. You can only afford to wait so long for these guys. Like, Carrington's probably going to have value later in the season, but it's pretty late in your season right now based on where you are in the standings. So, yeah, definitely, that's not a mistake at all.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good move.
Grayson said he declined that trade offer right when he got it. The Dynasty League
Nice.
one. Good work there. Let's see. And Kevin has some silly season stash names here. I'll just read them off. Jose Alvarado, Cam Thomas, Jose Alvarado and Zaire Williams in terms of silly season guys. What do we think about them?
I mean, I think Jose Alvarado, I don't feel good about that, because I'm not. I guess DeJounte Murray could get shut down and CJ McCollum, or like CJ could get traded, DeJounte could get shut down. Like, I guess that's a possibility. In which case, yeah, Jose Alvarado would probably start at point guard and be able to get you some good assists and steals. But not high enough upside for me to consider him like a silly season stash, I guess.
How about Zaire Williams? I feel a little bit better about Zaire in terms of a silly season guy. Even though Brooklyn has a lot of young guards and wings that may see time, at that point. But I think he's one that he may be able to give you some value there. I don't know if I would stash him right now, but he would certainly be someone on my watch list for that point in the season.
Yeah, I think watch list is a great way to put it because he should play a lot down the
Mhm.
stretch. And when he's gotten the chance to start, the numbers have been pretty good. But it's, again, not like a stash that's worth at this point.
Yeah.
Watch list is just a good way to put it.
I'm interested to see what Brooklyn does with Dariq Whitehead too, in terms of his minutes, because he hasn't played much basketball because of the injuries. So we'll see what they do with him
That's
after the All-Star
that's
break.
been so annoying because I
Yeah.
remember specifically earlier this season, it was one of the games that they had like a bunch of guys out, and he scored 18 points, hit 6 threes, and I remember writing a blurb saying, "Hey, this guy's played like 5 basketball games, probably like a total of like, well, he had one game last year where he played a good bit, but like barely played at all. He just has this good game. He might enter the rotation for a tanking team." Then they
Yeah.
didn't play him for like 6 games straight, and
Yeah.
he played 15 minutes a couple of games ago in a blowout. And other than that, he hasn't played more than 10 minutes. I'm like,
Mhm.
this guy was the number 1 overall player in his high school class before his injuries.
Yeah.
Like, let's see if he's like, is he part of the future? Figure it out.
Mhm. I mean, you used the first on him, so
Exactly. Like, that's the other
yeah.
thing. I mean, he slipped to the 20s, but I don't know, man.
Mhm. Okay. He also asked about Jordan Hawkins as a silly. I think he's better than Alvarado in terms of the silly season in New Orleans because they still need to kind of figure out what they can do with him there. Um, Especially if Brandon Ingram moves on. I kind of feel like that's ultimately what's going to happen, either via trade or in the summer in free agency, just because his ceiling's kind of capped. You kind of know what you're going to get with Brandon Ingram at this point, but Hawkins, can he do more than just be a guy who runs off screens or catch and shoot guy? Can he be a bit more than that? I think that's something to kind of look for during the silly season with him.
Yeah, I agree. He's already had a couple good games recently. Had
Mhm.
some good games as a rookie. I think out of these 3, I think he's probably most worth stashing.
Yeah. All right. Do you think Cam Thomas or RJ Barrett shutdown candidates?
I think Camp Thomas is
Yeah.
for sure. I think RJ's a little bit more iffy. I'm not
Mhm.
confident that he will be. I think, especially like in April, sure. Um, but Toronto's been pretty good about ethically tanking this year. Like I mean, obviously, quickly's been out a good bit, but they've
Yeah.
been playing all their guys, playing hard, and they still just lost a lot. So I don't think that they're going to be like focusing on benching RJ.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. Ethical tanking. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right, 12-team 9-cat head to head. If I were to try to package Sexton and Misi in a 2-for-1, who might you target? Ugh. I I can't see you getting anyone within like a top 100 for that package, to be honest with you.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Yeah, because in
Um,
terms of Misi, you're kind of selling hope here. It's like maybe he'll get more minutes and opportunities during the silly season, especially if they're to put Zion on the bench for a few games, just have him sit out. But that's a tough thing to sell. And I don't know if you're going to get too much value in return for that.
could you go like? I mean, it's gonna be a barely rosterable player. A
Yeah.
couple guys here ranked in the 90s: CJ McCollum, Jalen Green, Keegan Murray, Naz Reid, Santi Aldama. Maybe I would. I don't know if there's any of those guys that I would give up for this package, though. So I think that's just going to be.
Yeah.
I think in order for the 2-for-1 to work, if moving one of these guys, it can't be a package of these two. It has to be somebody that's more worth rostering plus one of these guys to kind of upgrade, as opposed to 2 like potentially droppable guys for somebody that's not like it. I don't know if it makes sense to the other team enough for them to do it.
Yeah. As you look at like the range where Sexton and Misi are in the rankings, you've also got guys like Kawhi Leonard down there, Dante DiVincenzo. There's no way you're going to get them in a trade. So
Hmm.
I think if anything, you're probably looking to drop Misi outright and then see what's on the waiver on your league's waiver wire because yeah, that's not the most attractive trade package, as you say in the comments here. So
Yeah, it's a nice way to put it.
All right. Someone asking if Khalil Ware is going to get the minutes to be productive going forward. I think we can comfortably say yes. We can confidently say yes. He's been outstanding recently, and I don't think that's going to change. With the Jimmy Butler situation, there's even less reason for them to consider moving him out of the starting lineup. So nothing to worry about with Khalil Ware moving forward, I think. As long as he stays healthy, should be fine.
Yeah, he's a must-roster player, in my opinion. I don't think that's that's a pretty common shared opinion, I think, in the fantasy basketball community. Like, if he's sitting on your waiver wire, add him.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Bilal Coulibaly is on his waiver wire. Would you drop any of Alsar, Misi, George, or Sexton? Only concerns you got 3 center designated players and 3 point guard designated players.
Goodness. I don't feel great about any of these guys. I think the hope is that Washington trades Kyle Kuzma at the deadline and Coulibaly just gets more usage. Like we talked about earlier, Sar's been a little bit hit or miss. I don't think I'd drop him yet. Yves Misi, again, like, has upside for down the stretch of the season. I'd hold on if I could, which leaves, I'm assuming, Keontae George or Colin Sexton. I think I might drop Keontae and pick up Coulibaly. Sexton's been starting over Keontae, and then if Sexton's traded, I assume he's going to have a pretty good role somewhere else. Whereas Keontae has just been a pretty disappointing category league player in general.
Yeah, I guess he'd be the one. I don't really feel good about any of these, including Bilal, just because the minutes are there, but the production hasn't been. I think that's the biggest concern, especially the percentages. And what you're kind of hoping for with him is that they get Kyle Kuzma out of there, because that man is not helping the situation at all in Washington. And based on recent comments, doesn't seem like he has much desire to either. You kind of need him to be traded to kind of clear things up for a lot of those young guys. Jordan Poole's been good, but Bilal's starting. The issue is that what types of opportunities is he going to get offensively to improve his game? Because they really haven't been there. So I think that's going to be the concern. And got about 10 minutes. Guess we can wait see if anything else trickles in question-wise.
Any players or anybody you're expecting to be traded at the deadline? I mean, I think we kind of expect Jimmy Butler to be traded, but is there anybody else that you think could move to the deadline?
Yeah, I don't think Bradley Beal's going to be going anywhere, just because where can you move him? And he has that no trade clause like that. Dude, I don't know, man. It's like the opposite of the Bobby Bonilla day. Like, this is going to go down as like an absolutely dreadful contract. Like, think about 2 players in the NBA currently have no trade clauses: LeBron James and Bradley Beal. Now, Bradley's been shit. I'm sorry, but that's just going to go down in history as one of those situations. Like, it's good for him that he got it, but
yeah, shout out to his agent.
Yeah, his agent. So I guess we can celebrate him every year at this point. But wow,
did you see there was a quote about, like, Beal could be moved to Chicago, but he wants to go to a winning team. Like, makes sense, but
I think the
but
weather
also
too.
the cold weather. So it's like, I want to go to a winter and warm weather. It's like, yeah, man, don't we all?
Yeah, exactly. Right, so let's see. Grayson has a Khalil Ware question. Where does he go in the next dynasty rankings? Above players like Giddey, Alsar, Gobert, and Tari? Absolutely. For him to be playing as well as he has as a rookie, oh yeah, I'm not sure how high. I didn't know you know more about the Dynasty game than I do, but he's going to be. I'd assume he'd probably be like what, top 25, I think.
I
Is
don't know
that a
if I'd
bit
go that
ambitious?
high.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
at this
Top
point,
50, yeah.
I think top 50 is probably a better range. I think it would. I mean, if we sat down and made rankings, it'd probably be easier to give an exact number. But I would
Yeah.
say 100% above Gideon Gobert. Um, Tari and Nassar have a little bit more of question marks because the upside is still tremendous there.
Hmm.
But Tari's obviously had the injury issues, and Nassar has been kind of iffy this year, as we talked about a couple of times already. I don't think it's unrealistic to say that Ware should be ranked above them at this point, but the sample size is pretty small of this
Yeah.
success. So if he keeps that for the rest of the season, we'll look at the summer. I think top 50 is definitely realistic.
Hmm. All right. I need to calm down a bit. Top 25, probably a bit
Top
much.
10. Top 10.
Quote Jadakiss, man. Top 5 DOA, right? All right. Kevin asks, is Jonas Valanciunas a lock to get traded at the deadline? I don't have information on that, so I'm not going to sit here and say lock, but I feel like he's one of those bigs who could fetch back decent value. Like, I'm not expecting like a first rounder in return, but they may be able to get something of value for him because he's played pretty well this season. So I think he's someone whose name should pick up even more between now and the trade deadline. And I would not be surprised if he were traded.
Yeah, I haven't seen anything that would say that teams are targeting him or that they're looking to move him.
Mm-hmm.
And I think they kind of signed him with the intention of him playing center with Sarr at the 4, but that hasn't happened at all. So he's definitely a movable player. From what I remember, a very team-friendly deal. There are a number of teams that could use a center, like the Lakers. I mean, Anthony Davis has made it clear that he wants a center next to him in the starting lineup, which there's a number available. It doesn't mean it's going to be Valanciunas. Dallas is going to be without Lively and Maxi Kleba for months. So it's just Dan Gafford. I'd be very surprised if they didn't trade for a center.
Yeah.
I'm sure there'll be other teams that are looking for a center as well. So I wouldn't call it a lock, but it wouldn't shock me at all.
In terms of Dallas, would they be looking for just any center or centers in the same mold of Gafford and Lively, just to have like that lob threat and a mobile defender? Because Valanciunas doesn't really fit that mold. But
that's fair. Yeah, I think some of the other names that I've thought of that were more realistic were Clint Capella and Robert Williams. I think Williams would probably be the best option for them. Maybe I'm just kind of hoping that they trade Capella because I just think 4 minutes for Congo. But yeah, I would assume a center gets moved to Dallas, and they have given Maxi Kleba a good bit of minutes at center when he was healthy. And obviously, Valanciunas doesn't fit that mold at all. But a mobile center does make sense.
Yeah. Tari Eason question: would you be looking to hold him, or would you be holding him or looking to move now that he's playing? The leg situation still feels a bit murky. He is out tonight, second game of a back-to-back, so I think that's your concern there. But when he's on the floor, he's close to a top 50 player in 9-cap. So I would hold him for that reason, especially with the Jabari Smith Jr. situation. Still don't know when exactly he'll be back. So, yeah, I think Eason is definitely worth the risk right now. My one concern would be like, with that extended absence, they said that was for injury management reasons. That's probably the first time I've heard of an injury management situation that's run 10 games. So that would be – oh, okay. I forgot about
the second time you've heard.
Yeah, there you go. The second time. All right.
But a Joel Embiid injury comparison is probably not the one we're looking for for our 23-year-old forward.
Okay. It is surprising that Cam Thomas is such a lock to get shut down, even though he's only 23. Is that solely for them to tank and keep losing?
Yeah. And I wouldn't say it's a lock that he's going to get shut down. It's just the fact that he's already missed a lot of time.
Yeah. They brought him back too early the first time too. So
yeah, and he's not good enough where it's like they can't play him because they'll win too many games. Like he's good, but he's not that good, which
Yeah.
is why they're in the situation that they're in. So I don't think it's like Cam Thomas's season is done, but I mean, I don't know. He may not play as many games as we need him to down the stretch, which could be like a half shutdown or a semi shutdown candidate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and plus Brooklyn with those Finney Smith and Schroeder trades, they kind of accomplished that goal of not. I don't know if I'd say competing, but it doesn't look as obvious than if they were to like sit a bunch of guys down. So yeah, I just need that man to come back for the final game of the regular season and go for 40 plus like he usually does. So
that'd be awesome. Just like doesn't play for 4 months, comes in April 13th and just scores 50 on 45 shots.
Yeah. The most random final game explosion remains Kenneth Lofton Jr. though.
Oh, he's the king.
Memphis put him out there. Memphis put him out there and he goes like 44 and 14 or something like that. That was
something ridiculous.
That's why you should not play your fantasy season all the way to the final day of the NBA season.
Yep.
Right. And we will wrap up this question from Clark Kent. Looking for a center or power forward. Missed out on Nick Richards and Khalil Ware. Are there any to keep an eye on? I mean, Klingon, I guess. But
I think that's the one.
Yeah, because I think he's someone that we kind of figure his minutes are going to increase as the season wears on here. So he would be one. But if he missed out on Richards and Ware, it kind of feels like it's tough to find much value at this point.
I could throw Noah Clowney's name out there, which, I mean, I think we talked about Day'Ron Sharp earlier as well. I'm just trying to go through all the teams in the center options, but Klingon's probably the best guy. If Jakob Poeltl gets traded, then there will be some center minutes there. Maybe Kyle Filipowski. But, I mean, none are probably going to see the bump in usage like Nick Richards has.
Yeah, true. Okay, we discussed Jalen Johnson earlier, so we're not going to go back to that. But Cam Thomas, would you consider trading him for Naz Reid or Nikola Jovic?
Yeah, I think I would do that. Because, I mean, Cam Thomas, even if he does come back, I don't know when he's going to come back or how many games he's going to play after he comes back. I feel pretty good about Naz Reid and Jovic playing a good-sized role for the rest of the season, though Jovic is going to be dependent on what they do at the deadline. I think Naz Reid would probably, I think that's a trade I would do even probably earlier. Maybe not earlier in the season, but I think I'd rather have Naz Reid than Cam Thomas.
Yeah. No argument here. And with that, we're going to say thanks again for tuning in and asking some really fun questions. As usual, we'll have our Rotoworld Basketball Show podcast tomorrow. Be the two of us, and we will have a special guest tomorrow. We'll wait until tomorrow to tell you who that special guest is, 2 p.m. Eastern. Hey, this time next week will be 2 days away from the trade deadline, so should be even more fun scuttlebutt and rumors to work through. So for Noah and myself, thanks again for tuning in, and take care.